Hello, everybody. My name's Kev. I run a not-for-profit social enterprise called Inspired Youth, and we work with lived experience to create campaigns to make a difference in the community, raising awareness and tackling stigma. And today, I'm telling my story, which is quite a difficult story, but one that I feel is important to sort of tell. It starts with my mum. She was from Belfast. And it was the Troubles at the time, and it was just getting really bad there. And the army were on the street, and she ran away out of wedlock, pregnant with a child, which at the time was the Magdalene sisters. If you've ever seen any of those stories, she was frightened that her baby would be getting taken away, or that she would be forced to go and live with the nuns and live a life of punishment, effectively. And she didn't want to do that, so she was scared, and they made a plan to run away. And I remember her telling me this story recently, because she passed away in 2019 at the end of last year, which was really tragic. But she told me lots of stories before then. One of the stories was, well, the original story of her running away. She told mum and dad that she was going on a holiday to London, and off she went, said goodbye and everything, and she had a room lined up. My dad had gone ahead, and she had a room lined up, and she said it was just this little tiny room with like hardly any facilities. And she was from Belfast, and she'd never seen a person of colour, so she was like, it was this explosion of different cultures and all these new things to get her head around. And she was pregnant with her first child, and it was at a time where she was telling me that in the job centre, it said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish in the window, and that, you know, it was really hard to get accommodation because people wouldn't take you if you were Irish. Landlords wouldn't let you rent, and so it took them a long time to sort of get moving. And I think they both had like jobs, so he was doing some stuff on the underground, my dad, and my mum was working in a little bakery. But she always said to me she was like really timid and quite shy. And at some point, my dad basically joins the British Army, and that secures for them a life, which in itself, coming from Belfast, it's a complicated thing that I won't go into now. But you know, he went on that path, and then at some point in my dad's army career, he leaves the army, and I think in my story, I remember pictures of my older siblings, and you can tell in the pictures that they're well dressed. They've got money. They've got money to spend on the latest stuff. I mean, you look horrific, don't you, when you look back at them and you think, "Oh, what did you dress me in?" But at the time, that was the way that things looked and the way that people dressed and things. And so you could see that they had wealth and they had security. They obviously in the army, you're given a house, and we came to York. We came to York, and we started a life here. And I was growing up. I think I was 5 when I came to York, and my mum had 9 children in total: Philip, Connor, Nina, Kira, me, Kevin, Declan, Ronan, Podrick, and Brendan. And we lived in York, and we lived in a little council house on a road called Kingsway North, and it was the 50p meters. I always remember when the lights used to go out, you know, like the electric's gone, 50p. Has anyone got 50p? And then candles were out. Remember those memories quite fondly. And it was strange as well back then in England. Irish people were quite like vilified, and you know, they had connotations to being Irish, and you got stigma and stereotypes that went with that. So you sort of were a bit shunted. Do you know what I mean? You were the dark horse immediately. So you know, suddenly my dad's got no income, and they've got all of these kids, and at some point, I mean, I'm sort of like jumping through the story, but it's a lot to tell, really. But anyway, at some point in our childhood, me and my brothers were sexually abused, and basically one of my brothers disclosed this to a social worker, and then the whole thing started moving, and we all got asked questions. And to be honest, for me, that part was a real relief, because there's a shame that comes with being a victim that isn't yours, but that you feel it anyway. And I think because you've been violated in your innocence and your, you know, intimately, I think that it's really hard to deal with, especially as a boy, and dealing with that. Anyway, so this stuff happened, and we got whisked off in a blacked out windows car, to a mirrored room where there was cameras behind it, and these police officers asking you all these questions. And of course, they're doing an investigation, so they ask you lots of questions, and they ask you to repeat stuff, and they ask you to expand on things, and they ask you to go into detail. And of course, it's the last thing you want to really do, and it's a very traumatic part of the process. So they interviewed us all. It was two of my brothers and me that were all victims of this particular predator, who I will say now that was later convicted. But in the middle of this court case that was pending court case, which was supposed to be fast tracked, because for children victims of trauma like that kind of crime, it's really important to get the trial on the go and moving for their own well-being and their mental health. And at the time, effectively, the story is, Mum was like, my kids are really disturbed. The guy's out on bail and he's living round the corner at his parents' house, so we can walk past him in the street. And my little brother Declan was running away from home, ending up in safe houses, turning up at the Samaritans. Like, he was really troubled. It was clear to everybody, for everyone to see. And at some point, he'd even attempted an overdose. And so it was all recorded, and they knew all about it. But the CPS and the police and the people dealing with the case and the council, they were all like, it's a risk to give your children counselling because it might contaminate the court evidence. And I'm assuming that means that somebody could manipulate our stories, the same stories that were like basically impossible to tell to a police officer because it broke your heart and it reminded you of all of the abuse that you'd been suffering. But in some ways, it being out was good because I didn't know how I was going to do that, to get that truth out there. But it came out, we got interviewed, and it was taking ages and ages and ages for this court thing. We were all frightened about standing in the dock and giving our evidence and being cross-examined. I think they were going to do it by a video link, but nonetheless, it was this event that you were frightened about, where there was going to be two sides, and they were explaining to you that, you know, the other side's going to really pull you apart and all the rest of it. And we were just at some point before my brother's death, not too long before my brother's death, my mum and dad's marriage broke down and they separated. And so my mum was on her own at the time. She had 9 kids. I think 4 of them were pretty much grown up, but then she had us. I was the oldest of the youngest, so I was 15. And a year into starting the investigation and starting to process the trial, we still had not been given any counselling or any support, on the basis that, you know, effectively they said to my mum, do you want to be responsible for the guy walking free? And of course, she wants justice for children. And I never understood why they didn't go, we're going to get you justice no matter what. And that's the way we're going to go. And then in the end, what happened was Declan took his own life. He was 13. The trial didn't come round yet. And I remember that morning getting up, I was 15. And when I say I was 15, I was just like a 15-year-old that didn't get out of bed. You could have a storm outside and I wouldn't wake up. I wasn't getting up till 10:30, or something like this. I was on all sorts of medication. I think I was being given cocodamol for my migraines. I used to get really bad migraines, just to do with all the trauma, I think. But anyway, this morning, Mum woke me up with a scream. And I'll never forget that scream. And I ran to the bottom of the stairs. I jumped straight out of bed. It was like I knew that something was different. And I ran downstairs. And at first, I went into the front room. And I can remember just looking at my mum and just seeing her in front of me. And she was screaming and she was shaking, and weeping. And I said, "What is it? What is it? What is it?" And I was like, I just went to hold her and hug her. And I said, "What's wrong, Mum? You know, like, why are you like this?" I didn't understand. I'd never seen her like this. And she said, "Look." And I looked across the room and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And in that moment, as a 15-year-old boy, I really wanted to be the adult. I wanted to love her through it, you know what I mean? So anyway, Declan passes away. And in addition to that, one of the things about a court case to do with sexual abuse is the details that you do give in the interview. And because one of my brothers didn't know the name, the technical adult name, for the abuses that took place on him, they dropped those charges. Declan couldn't stand in the trial, so they dropped all the charges against Declan, and they did a plea bargain deal, and they offered he took accountability for some of the lesser crimes against me, but never got punished for what happened to Declan. And he even wrote a letter to my brother, my older brother, because he was a friend of my brother's, saying, "I'm sorry for doing this." Anyway, they gave him 4 years in court. It got halved on appeal, so he served 12 months in jail. And I've lived with that pain of that loss and that trauma for 23 years. And one of the things that I've been trying to do, because in my adult life, it's taken me 23 years, but 2019, I went to a charity called Survive, fantastic charity. They're there for people like me that are adult survivors that never unpacked it and dealt with it as a child. Because of course, once that happened to me as a 15-year-old, all of the interventions and stuff my mum was screaming for, they were throwing them at us. But of course, at this point, I don't trust the people that I don't trust adults anyway, and I don't trust these authorities because they've let us down. And what use is your help now when we were screaming for it before, sort of thing. So I ended up going on a really spiral downward path. I was really abusing drugs and didn't care. I tried to kill myself, I took an overdose, and I was trying to do college, but I was just a messed up teenager that just still couldn't get past what had happened to us, the injustice of it. And so, yeah, so 23 years later, I decided to pick up the courage to get in touch with this charity. And I got I think I had 15 or 20 sessions with this counsellor. And it was like raw and emotional doing it. But I think someone looking at you from the other side of the room in the other chair saying, you know, I'm not surprised. It's completely normal. Like, that is such a big trauma to go through, and you're bound to feel that reassurance that how you feel in the way that you know. Because I think with mental health, like if somebody breaks their leg or somebody's drowning, we send out a boat. You know, the physical things we react to immediately, don't we? But when it's a mental, hidden sort of thing, people aren't as quick to rush out with the boats, with the rescue boats. So. Anyway, to cut a very, very long story short, I had a remarkable person in my life called Alison, and I called her Ali Willow, which I'm not sure if you even enjoyed that title, but she was a cool teacher at the college. I was doing my media course, which I failed miserably on attendance. And I passed the actual modules, but I didn't go enough to pass, and there was a rule about it. So that meant that effectively I should have been kicked off and not continued with the second year. And that's it. I can't get a student grant or whatever like that. And she just basically sat me down and went, "Kev, I know what you've been through. I know your story. And I think you're really talented, and I think you've got loads of potential. And I'd hate it if what happened to you that wasn't your fault stopped you from achieving something." So it making me feel a bit emotional. And it was that second chance thing. You know, someone believing in you, going, you know, they're not going, "Oh, well, you're doing this wrong and you're getting that, you're not turning." You know, someone just going, "I can see past all that surface stuff, and I can see a messed up kid. Needs someone to believe in him." And, you know, it led to great things. I did the course again. She started out me getting a grant so I could do the course again and get my books and stuff that I needed. Because obviously I was from a poor family, so we didn't have resources for those kind of things. And Yeah, so I ended up going to university. I got a first degree on a film and media course, and my first film was dedicated to Declan. So, and it won a Royal Television Society award for the student competition that they do down there in the regions, and it was amazing. I was like, wow, I'm telling my story, and my mum had always told me, because the reason I did media was because she found a bit of my writing. Because for me, the only thing as a child that I had was a pen. Like I didn't really talk to other people, like adults as well. Like I didn't share because I didn't want to talk about it. So I would write it down. And my mum found some of these writings one day, and she was sat with a friend one day when I came back from school, crying on sofa with a friend. And I said, "What are you crying for?" She went, "I've been reading your writing." She said, it's really beautiful, and like you're a really great writer. You should do something with that. So that's why I ended up doing college. But I was still a bit messed up, and I was involved sort of with the wrong people. And anyway, I went to university, left university with a first, and like got told to go to London and be a runner and get into production. And I wasn't interested at all in the glamour of television. I wanted to use the media for something like a purpose. I wanted it to be genuine. I didn't want it to have an agenda, or be edited in a certain way to fit certain. I wanted to tell real stories. So I went back to my hometown in York and got a job in a homeless shelter. Just thought, this is great, I can make a difference. So I worked there for 2 years, and during that time, I made a documentary called Stranded on Cloud 9, which was basically my reaction to seeing these people in this revolving door of addiction, of heroin addiction, and feeling helpless actually in my job to help them, and thinking, what can I do? I can maybe tell their story to show, A, they're a human being, not just a label, not just a smackhead or a crackhead or whatever the labels that we put on people like that in society, that they're a human being with a backstory, with a mum and a dad, or an absent mum or an absent dad, you know, that have had trauma. A lot of them have been abused. A lot of them have had sexual abuse. So you can see that's where I was going. So there I'm in this place, and I'm working with these people that I could have been, and that's why I was there, because I thought I could be in your shoes, and I had compassion for them. So I did that, but I felt frustrated. So we ended up making this film with some people that were living at the hostel to talk about the trauma of this addiction that they were stuck in, to then educate teenagers about what it looks like in an addict's world, but also to humanize them as people, because they were grieving, they were stuck, they were dying of guilt from the things they'd stolen off the family that they loved, and they did love them. It wasn't them, in a sense, it was the hunger for this, craving for this gripping drug, and I wanted to show that. So that started me on the road to where I am now, really, that I started seeing that media could have a powerful purpose in the world. And if I put the people who are affected by something at the heart of what the message is, then you can create something massively powerful. And in terms of the stuff with counselling, like one of the counsellors basically said to me, this still happens. And I was speaking to her, and that basically people cancel their pre-trial counselling because they've been surely advised or cautioned against it, when in actual legislation it says that there should be that they should not be dissuaded from having the support they need pre, during, and post-trial. So to expect us as children to go through that trauma for a 12-month period without properly talking to somebody about how we feel, and I don't mean meeting up and having groups and, you know, what's concerning you, not that stuff. I'm talking about professional, caring, empathic people that can understand the trauma-informed, and they go, let's get alongside these young people, let's give them the support they need, and let's do it in a way that protects the integrity of a trial. Because I think to myself, we're on video, right? So when Declan passed away, it grieves me that a jury, you're telling me that a jury couldn't sit in front of his video post his life and say, he's not here to defend himself, but do I believe that child is telling the truth or not? You know, and that they could have used that as evidence. Don't know how the law works. To me, that's insane. But so I'm on a bit of a campaign, which is really hard to get moving, because it's about a difficult subject and you need some weight behind it. And I've just got a petition set up saying, you know, make it mandatory for the process, the legal process, to put the well-being of traumatized victims, number one, without them feeling like getting that access to support would then somehow rob them of justice. Like, how does that work, and why is that happening? And it's 23 years since that happened, and it's happening now, and I want it to change. And it's hard. And you write letters, and you write to your government, and you try to get, and it's a slow thing. So I'd love to be able to change that. If I could get Declan's Law that gives kids like solid guarantee they're going to get support. It's not your fault, you're a victim. Someone else had the pen to your story at that point. And I'm sorry that I didn't really expect to get emotional, like in this sense, on a video call, sort of like telling my story. But I can't help it. It's real, innit? And I'm passionate about Declan's Law. I'm passionate about turning something negative into something positive, and that's what I've always tried to do with my life. So that's why I do Inspired Youth. That's why I set it up. I wanted to see little Declans with their little backpacks of problems and just go, do you know what? Like my teacher did. See past that surface. You know, we all know the iceberg thing, where on the surface they're aggressive and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're behaving in this way and they're behaving in that way. And I just think, no, just have compassion on them, especially victims that are in this scary process that that is all really humiliating and extremely stressful and traumatic for a young person. So I'm appalled it still happens. I'm appalled by it. But I'm trying my best to do something about it, rather than just sort of bang on about it and complain about it and be frustrated about it. I wanted to take action. So I've got 1,200 votes, signatures on that thing. And people on my social media are probably sick of me. They're like, I've signed it, Kevin. I'm like, yeah, I know, but can you pass it on? And I'm passionate about it. So I've got 1,200. I need 10,000 for it to get discussed. So, you know, if anyone's watching this and you feel compassion to help me, then I'd really appreciate that.